When Tiffany Brooks arrived at Brookstone Capital, it was as if the air in the building shifted, though not in the way one might hope. 27, she walked into the role of head of HR with a confidence that suggested decades of experience. In reality, her resume boasted just one online course, People Management for Startups from Udemy. But armed with buzzwords like transformational culture and synergy, she moved through the halls as if she had cracked the secret code to corporate success. Melissa Carter watched the change unfold with equal parts disbelief and quiet concern. Tiffany's version of leadership didn't look like leadership at all. It looked like a curated Instagram feed brought to life. She replaced the polished oak conference table with a scattering of beanbag chairs, proclaiming it would open minds to innovation. Clean, neutral office walls became pastel backdrops perfect for selfies. Motivational quotes framed in gold appeared overnight. Work hard, brunch harder sat directly above the payroll desk. It was a culture shift no one had asked for, built on aesthetics rather than substance. Long-standing policies were reimagined into casual guidelines. The structured onboarding process Melissa had refined over years was replaced with Tiffany's Welcome Brunch experience, where new hires learned about office hashtags before they understood compliance protocols. From Melissa's perspective, it was less about synergy and more about spectacle. The change wasn't just cosmetic, it altered the rhythm of the office. Deadlines were treated like flexible suggestions, and the careful systems that protected the company from regulatory missteps were quietly pushed aside in favor of creative flow. In Melissa's mind, it was like watching a TikTok trend try to run a Fortune 500 firm, entertaining for a moment but unsustainable and dangerously out of touch with the stakes involved. Problem was, Tiffany wasn't just playing at this, she believed it was progress. And Melissa knew from experience that belief without understanding was the most dangerous combination of all. The announcement came in a Monday morning email, short, confident, and utterly alarming. Tiffany Brooks declared that Brookstone Capital would be retiring its long-standing legacy risk assessment scripts. To her, these systems were outdated and too slow, relics from a less agile era. To Melissa Carter, they were the silent guardians of the company's financial integrity, the invisible firewall that caught trouble before it became disaster. For over a decade, those scripts had combed through every transaction, flagging unusual activity, catching discrepancies in seconds, and ensuring that the firm's operations stayed firmly within SEC regulations. They were the kind of system no client ever saw, but every client benefited from, meticulous, methodical, and utterly without ego. But Tiffany didn't see invisible value. She saw clunky code and a chance to modernize the brand. Her replacement was a sleek, cloud-based SaaS platform marketed with glossy videos and startup swagger. Promised real-time analytics, AI-driven insights, and a dashboard that looked like it belonged in a Silicon Valley pitch deck. But Melissa could see the cracks before the transition was even complete. The system wasn't properly configured for Brookstone's transaction patterns. Key compliance checks were missing. Risk thresholds, carefully calibrated over years, were either too lax or completely absent. Melissa tried to raise her concerns. She outlined the gaps, the untested modules, the blind spots in the fraud detection layer. But Tiffany dismissed her objections as resistance to innovation, a phrase she wielded like a verdict. The switchover went ahead in less than 2 weeks, bypassing the usual pilot testing and contingency planning. Then the first sign of trouble surfaced. A major report, one that should have alerted executives to a $2 million loss in a single trading account, never appeared on the new dashboard. Melissa only discovered it while running a manual reconciliation, something she did out of habit rather than necessity. The data was there, buried in the system's raw logs, but the alert trigger had never been set up. When she brought it to Tiffany, expecting urgency, she got a smile and a shrug. "Glitch," Tiffany said, as if the word could erase the damage. She promised the vendor would look into it but made no effort to investigate further. In her view, technology was supposed to be seamless, and acknowledging flaws would break the illusion she was selling. To Melissa, it wasn't just a mistake, it was a fracture in the company's defenses. $2 million had slipped out of sight, hidden not by malice but by neglect and misplaced confidence. And she knew deep down that this was only the first crack. What worried her most was not the loss itself, but the certainty that bigger ones were coming, and Tiffany was blind to them all. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where the office hum felt almost subdued. Melissa had just finished reviewing a small anomaly in the derivatives ledger when an email pinged her inbox. Subject line: Meeting HR. No context, no agenda. When she stepped into the HR office, she was met with the unmistakable scent of new furniture polish and the sight of Tiffany Brooks perched behind a spotless desk, her brand-new MacBook Pro still in its packaging, the protective film unpeeled. Tiffany radiated a confidence that felt rehearsed, as if she'd been practicing for this moment in the mirror. Conversation was short, clinical, and wrapped in corporate gloss. Tiffany leaned forward slightly, her tone equal parts cheerful and final. The first reason came like a punch: we need fresher energy in the data team. The second followed immediately, framed as constructive feedback but stripped of any actual substance. You're overcomplicating things. In Tiffany's mind, Melissa's insistence on precision, her push for risk safeguards, her refusal to accept shallow solutions, all of it was baggage that slowed the momentum Tiffany wanted to project. Melissa knew the decision had been made long before this meeting. There were no performance reviews on the table, no discussions of improvement plans, no metrics that justified her removal. Just a vague vision of a younger, more dynamic department, and the unspoken reality that Melissa didn't fit into Tiffany's curated image of a modern, Instagram-ready workplace. The paperwork was waiting in her inbox before she even got back to her desk. A digital termination letter, signed electronically with all the sterile efficiency of an automated invoice. But the line at the bottom caught her eye, Tiffany's personal flourish. Congratulations, you're free now. It was meant to sound liberating, but it read like a smug send-off, a final twist of the knife. Melissa sat still for a moment, letting the reality settle in. 14 years of service, erased in a 10-minute meeting and a single PDF attachment. No acknowledgement of the system she'd safeguarded, the crises she'd averted, the millions she'd helped protect. Just the implication that her value had expired, and someone younger and flashier could do better. But Melissa didn't leave with bitterness. She gathered her things calmly, her movements deliberate, almost unhurried. As she walked out of the HR office for the last time, she paused briefly in the doorway. Without raising her voice, she left Tiffany with a single thought, a quiet warning disguised as a parting remark. She told her to keep her number, adding that she might need it sooner than she thought. It wasn't bravado. It was certainty. 'Cause Melissa knew the risks Tiffany couldn't see yet, the vulnerabilities hidden beneath that glossy SaaS interface. And she knew that in the world of finance, ignorance wasn't just dangerous, it was catastrophic. Less than 24 hours after Melissa walked out of Brookstone Capital, the building's polished veneer began to crack. The first tremor came in the form of a misrouted trade confirmation. High-value transaction data meant for one client landed in the inbox of another. What should have been a routine settlement notice suddenly became a breach of confidentiality with the potential to trigger lawsuits. By midday, the second hit arrived. The Securities and Exchange Commission flagged multiple missing compliance records, sending an urgent notice to the firm. These weren't minor oversights. They were mandatory disclosures required by law, the kind Melissa's legacy system had always caught before submission. Now, with that system dismantled, entire data sets had slipped through the cracks. By late afternoon, the company's most prestigious client, an international holding group with billions under management, logged into their new, streamlined dashboard. What greeted them wasn't a clean portfolio summary but a glaring negative balance, an error caused by incomplete data syncing. To them, it looked like millions had evaporated overnight. Their response was swift: withdraw every cent and terminate the relationship. In the investment world, losing a client like that wasn't just bad, it was a death sentence for reputation. Inside Brookstone, panic spread like a contagion. Junior analysts scrambled to reconcile numbers that didn't match across platforms. Client managers were stuck on marathon calls trying to calm furious investors. IT worked frantically to patch the SaaS system, but without proper configuration documentation, and without Melissa's intimate understanding of the firm's workflows, they were essentially guessing. And at the center of it all was Tiffany Brooks, suddenly stripped of her influencer poise. Curated quotes on pastel walls offered no wisdom for this kind of collapse. By 2 a.m., her phone was in her hand, fingers trembling as she dialed the one number she never thought she'd have to call. Melissa answered on the second ring, her voice calm, almost detached. Tiffany's words spilled out in a rush, systems failing, clients threatening lawsuits, CC breathing down their necks. The final sentence carried the weight of desperation. "We can't fix this, the system's on fire." For a brief moment, there was silence on the line. Then Melissa's reply came, measured and resolute. "This isn't my fire anymore." She didn't raise her voice, didn't gloat. She simply stated the truth. Because Melissa knew this wasn't just a technical failure, it was the direct consequence of arrogance replacing expertise, of style being chosen over substance. And now, Brookstone Capital was paying the price in millions, in reputation and in sleepless nights. Just days after the chaos at Brookstone, Melissa's inbox lit up with a message from a fintech firm based in Austin. They had heard about her not through a resume or a recruiter, but through the industry's fastest communication channel, word of mouth among professionals who respected results. Their CTO had followed Melissa's work for years and knew exactly what she could bring to the table. The offer was precise and generous. They wanted her to lead a full restructuring of their financial data infrastructure, start to finish, with complete authority over tools, workflows, and compliance protocols. Compensation package was 40% higher than what she'd been making, with full remote flexibility. More than the numbers, though, it was the tone of the conversation that mattered. They didn't just want her skills, they valued her judgment. While Melissa was reading through the offer, news of Brookstone's downward spiral was making its rounds. The firm had lost several major clients, faced mounting legal pressure, and was bleeding both money and credibility. In official internal memos, Tiffany Brooks had been transitioned to a special projects role, a vague corporate euphemism that everyone understood meant quiet removal. Pastel walls and beanbag chairs were replaced with emergency task forces and damage control teams. Melissa, however, didn't feel vindictive satisfaction. She felt clarity. Her time at Brookstone had given her lessons she wouldn't forget. Family nepotism is a corporate time bomb. When positions are given as gifts rather than earned through competence, the fallout is inevitable. Invisible work only becomes visible when it's gone. Risk assessment, compliance checks, and behind-the-scenes systems are silent until their absence creates noise that no one can ignore. And most importantly, walking away is sometimes the loudest way to speak. There are moments when trying to fix a broken culture is less effective than letting it face the natural consequences of its own choices. Accepting the Austin fintech role was easy. Melissa signed the contract without hesitation, not because she wanted revenge, but because she recognized the value of her own expertise and the importance of working where it was truly respected. On her first day in the new position, she logged in from her home office with no fanfare. No pastel walls, no influencer slogans, just clean data streams, a capable team, and leadership that understood the difference between looking innovative and actually being innovative. Reflecting on the whirlwind of the past weeks, she summed it up in one final thought that she kept to herself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing, and let gravity finish the job. Melissa Carter had spent 14 years at Brookstone Capital building an unshakable reputation as the person who could spot a financial risk before anyone else even sensed a problem. Numbers weren't just data to her. They were a warning system, a map of hidden dangers, and a promise to every client that their future was safe. She thought that was the mission everyone shared. But when Tiffany Brooks, the CEO's daughter, swept in with bright smiles, vague strategies, and no real understanding of the systems that kept the company stable, Melissa began to see cracks forming. Safeguards were dismissed as too slow. Warnings were brushed aside as negative energy. And then, without any real conversation, Melissa was called into HR and told the office needed younger energy. She walked out with her dignity intact, unaware that she had just removed the one thread holding a very fragile web together. Within 24 hours, the very system she had protected began to unravel, and the same people who pushed her out would be begging for her return.